Okay. So I want to talk about our Greater Grace World Outreach, because one thing I want all of us to clearly understand when we leave here is who we are. What is Greater Grace World Outreach? How do we govern ourselves? How do we run ourselves? How do things happen? That's kind of the practical side of this. As some of you know, I've been the COO, or the Chief Operations Officer, here since Pastor Schaller came. The first thing I did was I was hired to be the principal of GGCA, which was quite a trip, because nobody understood why anybody would ever ask me to be the principal of a school, since I'm not really a principal of a, I'm not. But at that time, there was just so much shrapnel and warfare going on. They just needed somebody who could take a punch and had thick skin. So that's how I became the principal. As soon as that need was no longer necessary, we immediately found somebody who is a worthy principal to run our school, and we're thankful for that. Thankfully, I had my wife next to me who had her act together, who still does. But since then, the Chief Operations Officer, This one is actually now uploaded, the org chart, and same with our bylaws. I uploaded our GGWO bylaws, that you can take a look at those if you want to. They're interesting. They're still being revised. They're constantly under revision. As the newest thing we did in our bylaws was we have a conflict of interest policy across the campus, right? And that is that if you're involved in a decision where you can personally benefit, you can't be involved in the decision. You have to bow out of the decision. So, for example, I'm the Chief Operations Officer, and we have a coffee machine that we found up in the attic that's a really great coffee machine, And so we said, what are we going to do with it? And maybe we want to sell it. And somebody gave a price of what should we do, how much should we offer? And I'm interested in buying the machine. So I'm not even part of the decision. Are we going to sell it? For how much? I'm not even involved, because I could say, I'd like this. I think we should sell it for $200, and then go to Pastor Taggart and write the check for $200. Okay, that's a conflict of interest. Same with hires. If we're going to hire my wife, it's not my decision. I'm not allowed to be in that decision, because I can personally benefit from having a family member. So we have on our board, there's a group called the ECFA, the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. If you have that stamp on your organization, it means you are financially cool. If anybody wants to donate to you, they know these guys are worth, they're straight. So, but we had a problem, and that is that our board of elders, the majority of the board members were employees. Okay, do you see the conflict of interest there? Where is the conflict of interest? They're deciding their own salaries. Right? So that's a conflict of interest. So rather than fire our board, which you can't do because they run the church, we had to add enough members to the board to make the majority of those members be non-employees, to offset or to destroy the conflict of interest that's there. That goes into our bylaws here shortly. We haven't voted on it. It's kind of, I don't know, maybe.
Are these non-paid majority?
Non-paid majority. Okay. Yeah. So we just added 3 members, or 4 members. Gary Grunwald, Chris Moore, Bob Colban, who was also a trustee. He's the only trustee who's both an elder and a trustee. And Pastor Morrison. So those were the 4. But Pastor Morrison is also in the appeals board, so he's good to go. I mean, it works, but because he's on the appeals board, we're going to get a different elder, I think. That's why I think if you look at the change of elders on the bulletin, does anybody notice that? You'll notice there's a change. There's only 3 because Pastor Morrison isn't on there. He'll be replaced. But him being on there does take care of the conflict of interest, which was the point. So now we've taken care of that, but now we got a guy who's we've created another conflict of interest, which is that the appeals board has a specific purpose, which we'll talk about right now. Okay, so so the bylaws are kind of in a state of flux. There's some things they are ancient. They were written back in 1987 or 86. There's some genius to them. One of the genius is our trustee board, which we'll talk about right now. So, how's our church organized? When we look at the Scripture, you say the church is run by elders. Right? The church is run by elders. Elders, if you look at 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1, you can see what elders are. Elders are not degreed business people. They are not lawyers. They're not accountants. They're not engineers. They are spiritual people. They are pastors. The word elder and pastor are used synonymously or interchangeably. They represent the same office. So, although a pastor-teacher is a specific office, and we call that our presiding elder. So it's run by an elder board. Okay, an elder board is a group of spiritual people. We say that there's 2 things that these guys are. They are spiritual, which means they are immaterial, or they deal with the immaterial, and they walk by faith. Okay, these are elders. Okay, that's what you want to have running your church. The vast majority of churches have businessmen running their church. Christian businessmen, but businessmen. They have an elder board that is populated by professionals. Those are the people that run the church and keep it together. It means that that church is primarily an organization. Okay, our bylaws, and we rethought this when Pastor Stevens passed away. We rethought our bylaws and decided to keep it this way because we could have changed it, of course, to do what the other churches are doing, which is to have a board of professionals run the church, and they hire the spiritual man, who is the pastor. That's the setup. If you look around the United States, what's that?
Different pastors go to different churches to interview.
Yeah, they go.
Then they switch every 5-6 years.
Yeah, they're hired by. If it's Congregationalists, they're usually hired by a pulpit committee or something like that. If it's otherwise, if it's Presbyterian, then which is elder ruled, then they're hired by the board of elders. And you find it, Ed Young and Tim Keller, those guys, they are, as long as they're spiritual and as long as they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is to lead the church spiritually, they got a job, basically, is how it goes. John Piper just retired. I understand that, but so they've hired somebody else. But we didn't do it that way, and it makes it kind of interesting. So our church is run by the elder board. The elder board then is comprised of the presiding elder and elders, minimum 3, maximum 21. There's nothing magic about 21. We could have said maximum 7. You could have said minimum and maximum 3. There's nothing that dictates that number, except probably should be an odd number. Our pastor, our presiding elder, is actually the weakest he possibly could be. Pastor Schaller did not want veto power, right, which is very powerful. The elder board can't do anything without him saying okay. That veto power makes him a very powerful person, like the President of the United States is. Or you have an even number of board members, and his vote is worth 2. Sometimes that is the setup, to make him a little bit more, he breaks any tie, right? If his vote is worth 2. Pastor Schaller wanted his vote worth 1. He's just one of the guys. When he votes, it's his one vote. Of course, he's influential because he's the pastor. He's the spiritual leader of our church. So he has spiritual influence over those other guys, which we always like to let him vote last. Sometimes when he wants it to be really right, they have it unanimous. They have it anonymous, just so that nobody knows how Pastor Schaller voted, because people want to know, what's Pastor want, There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so then the elder board appoints the trustees. That's this group here, right? These are the trustees. Again, minimum 3. All the elders have to be ordained. Half of the trustees have to be ordained. So it has to be, so half means the majority. In all cases, it's a majority are ordained. But when you look at trustees, the trustees are, not to say that they're not spiritual, but they are material, and they walk by sight. Yeah, they're counting pennies. You don't want trustees walking by faith. Okay, that's scary. You want, the elders want hard, cold facts. They don't want some pastor, the Lord told me last night that we're going to get money, so let's do this. The pastor wants to know, we don't have any money to do whatever you're thinking of doing. But if you want to do it, tell us, and you guys can pray, and we can try to figure out what's going to happen. And the entryway is a good example. Let's do the entryway. Yeah. And the trustees said, yeah, but we're not using reserves. Well, then how are we going to build it? So we ended up doing a fundraiser. It had to be, and the fundraiser, we had to get a certain amount, otherwise it wasn't going to fly. So we ended up using the reserves. The trustees ended up buckling a little bit, so we ended up using $100K of reserves, and we raised $150K of the fundraiser. But the elders said, yeah, let's build it. Let's just use the reserves. We want to do it. We love it. Let's do it. And the trustees said, we don't recommend you do that. Here's why, blah, blah, blah. Walking absolutely by sight. Actually, walking on top of rules that we already made. Guys, we said that we were going to have reserves. That was already voted on. Do you want to vote and say, let's not have 3 months reserves? You want to re-vote and let's say only have 2 months? Because then we can solve the problem in a hurry. Because all of a sudden, bloop, $3.5 or $350,000 just floats to the surface. Spend it however you want. Or let's say there's no reserves. I kind of wonder what the Lord's going to say when we get to heaven. And he's going to say, let me ask you something. Exactly what were you saving the money for? Like you were raptured with $1 million in the bank? And you're a church? We contemplate that. So it's not $1 million. It's whatever, 800,000 of reserves or something like that. It's the reason is because 3 months to run this, which means if we have a catastrophe, all of our teachers still get paid, all of our staff still gets paid. If we have like what happened, Pastor Stevens passes away, we have our little transition, the perfect storm happens in our ministry, blows 33% of the people and their money out the door. So our offerings drop from $65,000 a week to $40,000 a week. That is a problem. And if we didn't have reserves, it would have been a huge problem. But we had reserves, so we didn't have to act like, oh my gosh, nobody's going to have any paycheck tomorrow. We got to start laying people off. Fire them. Everybody's fired. Gone. We didn't have to do that. We had time to kind of relax. And what are we going to do? We did end up laying off $180,000 worth of staff. There was two bloody battles that happened. We had this idea when you're budget cutting, of course you cut fat. No church should be supporting any fat, which means people that you don't really need, right? So we got rid of what we thought was, if any fat that we had, the fat went. Like, what happens if this person goes on vacation? Nothing happens. Okay, what does that tell you? Like, nobody noticed. He was on vacation for 3 weeks. Nobody noticed he was gone. Okay, well, that is a telltale sign that maybe he's on a list. Anyway, we don't have to think like that now. I mean, we have a balanced budget, praise the Lord, but without those reserves, the reserves are nice. They help us in a lot of areas. And the entryway is another example. If we want to do something that's missions-centered or mission-specific or mission-critical, that's what the reserves are for also. So I'm glad we have them. But I do wonder what the Lord's going to say when we get there. Yeah.
Just one comment about that. In the first chapter of that book by David Platt, he talks in the first chapter of the book by David Platt, Radical Together, he directly addresses that. Like, that was something he talked about his whole congregation with. They took it up and said, we have these reserves. Let's just give to missionaries. And I think he said they dumped like $500K within a period of maybe 6 months or a year, and they just supported all these missionaries, and the congregation said, let's do it. And I thought that was pretty wild. So I just,
pretty radical.
In the context of what you're saying, I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah. Yeah, he got some heat from Mark Driscoll. You know, he got some heat from some of his own camp because of that, because of the idea that if you're not poor, you're not spiritual kind of thing. You know, like if you're not poor, if you haven't sold everything, if you drive a new car, you're not spiritual. What do you need a new car for? You could be using that money to, you go too far down that road, and it's a trip. It's a heavy trip.
What Pastor was talking about last Sunday, Judas and the Mary and the ointment. What was it? The
Yeah.
lady with the ointment.
Yeah, the alabaster box.
Give it to the poor.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, the idea that selling everything and giving it to the poor. And of course, Jesus told the rich man, sell everything and give it to the poor, but he wasn't telling rich people, it was false theology if that was true, because clearly you don't get to heaven by selling anything, no matter how much of it you sell. You can. Yes, Sean.
Mike Angel.
Let's call him Mike.
Mike, okay. ECFA, is this like something a nationally regulated thing? Okay.
Not
and
federally, but nationally, yeah.
It's kind of a unified body of understanding,
Yeah.
right? And things like how many months reserve is ideal. Are there guidelines that ECFA kind of puts down for good governance for churches anywhere? Do they have like these?
It's interesting that ECFA, which is again the what did I say it was? Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, right? No, they don't give guidelines for reserves, specific guidelines. I actually, I take that back. I don't know if they do or not. I'll say it like that. But also, churches don't seek it's very strict. What we do as a church financially, first of all, Pastor Taggart and his team are Rottweilers. I mean, we do not mess around with our money. We do not write pieces of paper that are kind of half-truths in order for people to get this or get that. We don't let people donate to their own cause and then go on the mission field and they get the write-off for it. We don't let missionary work for somebody, then the guy makes a donation to his missions account. We don't let people write gifts to people who are going, the kid's going to GGCA and the parent, somebody wants to bless them with a gift. We don't let them give it if you want to give them a gift, go give them a gift. We're like amazing. And after all of that, we spend $20,000 a year to have outside auditors come that we change every 2 years because they shouldn't get familiar with your books, You get too close. So we change every 2 years the auditor so that we are squeaky clean. So there's the ECFA. There's not. I thought Pastor Taggart said that we will be the first church to actually have an ECFA certification. Churches just don't go for it because it's really designed for nonprofit organizations who are getting a lot of people's money so that they can say to people who are giving their money, you can give your money to us and trust us because we're going to use your money properly, But we're just going for it because we want to be as upright as we possibly can. And, so it's interesting that we're going for it. And that the elders, I mean, the conflict of interest is the trustees approve the budget. The trustees are really setting everything according to our budget. So the elders don't have they're not saying this is how much people should get. Never has that ever happened. Our elders don't even get that close. But still the elders say we would like to hold ourselves accountable to our own conflict of interest policy, and then we would like to be on the ECFA also, which the trustees kind of said, well, we can't be on it, and we're not going to get the certification because this is the way our elders are, and we're happy with it. It's not so. So let's continue. Okay, so trustees, material and site. Okay, we deal with the stuff. That's what trustees do. We deal with stuff. It's dimensional, at least 3. Measurable dimensions, right? If it weighs something, if it costs something, if it has size, if it takes up space, trustees are very interested in it. If it's like rooted in theology and vision and mission and all of that, the trustees, it's not that we're not interested. Once the elders give us their vision and the mission, we're all about keeping it. But trustees are not coming up with it. No vision at all. They don't even have to. It's not my role to start trying to lead the church on the vision of the church. We had a whole room full of spiritually minded guys whose specific role it is to do that. I think it's a really sane setup. And the guy who did our bylaws, I talked with him back in 2005. His name was Emil Pilke. And he said, he remembered pastors very well. And he said, Pastor Stevens was the first pastor in Baltimore to have bylaws that were like this. And he recommended them to every church after that he wrote their bylaws for them. That this is the way to govern a church. It just keeps it, lets the professionals be professionals and lets the spiritual guys be spiritual. And you don't have professionals running the church, and you don't have spiritual guys trying to count money. Okay, not that some guys aren't good at it. Okay, maybe the two more points here, and we're wrapping up. Okay, so we have elders, we have trustees. This line right here is the government line, okay? Above this line, it's government. Below this line, it's operation, okay? You could kind of call it like it's the head and the body. Above that line, it's the head, and below that line, it's the body. So inside the church, the elders have no power. Pastor Shibeli is an elder, but he doesn't have any power as an elder in the church. Okay? And Pastor Love, he's the youth pastor. He's the head of Grace Hour, but he's not like an elder that walks around with some sort of residual power from coming out of an elders meeting. Their power comes when they all go to meet. It's like putting in putting in your hand and super energy happens. That's the time that their power, and they are the most powerful on this campus, is when those elders are sitting one Monday a month right after the trustees meeting on the third Thursday. They meet on the Monday right after us, review our minutes, either veto them or not, and that is when they have their power. When they leave that meeting, they walk into this organization, right, which is our local church, and in that organization, they are not Their role as an elder has no place. There's not in our org chart anywhere in our operational org chart. The only person who spans both government and operation is one, and guess who it is? Pastor Schaller, yeah. He is at the same time the presiding elder and the CEO of the church, or the pastor, teacher of our church, the head of the administration of the church. He's the same person. That was not the case with Pastor Stevens. Pastor Stevens never defined who the CEO is, who the pastor is. Never used the term pastor-teacher, never defined himself as the head of the church at all. He's the presiding elder, and no relationship as far as what the church is. So we made the change and put that the presiding elder, when he is elected, he is at the same time we hire the pastor. Okay, appointing the elder, the chief elder, at the same time we appoint who's going to be the pastor of our church. So this blue spot on the bottom here is the church itself. And you can see the pastor teacher is here on the left. He is a CEO. Under him is a COO and the CFO. That's myself and Pastor Taggart. We are the execs. We call ourselves the executives only because it's kind of a corporate term, but it is who we are. So that's okay. So it's those three, but really myself and Pastor Taggart are hired. We're not. It's only Pastor Schaller. If you go with just the bylaws, Pastor Schaller stands alone. He hires his staff. He doesn't ask anybody. He just hires his staff. Of course, the trustees give him his budget, so he can't just do whatever he wants. That's why I have this line between the trustees and the pastor, because he is submitted to the vision of the elders and also to the budget and to the policies of the trustees. Pastor Schaller is not free to do whatever he wants. He has to work within the budget. So, but he's got a lot of clout. He's got a lot of clout. I mean, as long as he's, again, mission critical. These are the words that we use all the time. Mission critical. It's why we have our mission statement in our bulletin. Our mission is to teach, propagate, and to model, right, the Christian life. So, or the gospel. So that's what we should be spending all of our money doing. There's a couple of things. You know, we rent our a parking lot to the church that's up on the hill here. Without us, they couldn't have built their building. Right? They have a contract with us for their rental spots. They just bought ABC rental, so they're going to have their own parking lot. That is like, is that really mission specific? You know, that income, is it? And we say, well, they're a church, so it's okay. The nonprofits that rent our gym, they're not churches, they're nonprofits. You know, we skid a little bit along a line there about what is our mission, and everything we do should be mission critical. But besides those things, we've determined they're nonprofit. It's a church. You know, they're within our mission. But you can find around our plaza, people are doing mission-specific things. We don't have real estate. We're not. We could make a lot of money if we just rent our gym, and we could rent spaces. And if we had a real estate manager, an office manager that could rent spaces, discipleship halls hardly ever used. We could be making all kinds of money. We would say, well, the church is not. We're not real estate agents. It's like it's a diversion. Why would we do that? Because of money. We don't even, there's only one fundraiser that we do besides offerings. The biggest fundraiser we do is every week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week. It's called the offering. $2.4 million a year, right? That's a lot of fundraising. So we say, we are not using our energy to fundraise. We took the friendship banquet, gone. Melody of Hope, we call that Christian public relations. We're not in the Christian public relations business. Gone. The Jason Gray concert was free. We did Bebo Norman, we did Shane and Shane. After those two, we said That's Christian PR also. Why are we expending our energy trying to be buddies and let everybody think we're as cool as Shane and Shane? We don't need that. It's not our mission. It's gone. We're not spending our time. This was a free concert to everybody who came. Free, we said let's do the Jason Gray thing, and had a lot of good elements of it. But we are the thing about what Pastor Schaller's purpose is, it's all mission, very mission specific. So anyway, Pastor Schaller runs the church. We have two parts of our staff, what we call service staff, right, which is the people that make this whole thing happen. Yosei is part of our service staff. The guy paints. Find that in the Bible. His mission is to paint. But the building needs painting, so someone's got to paint it, so the church needs to have service departments. We're thankful for that. But then there's also the pastoral staff, the pastoral side of the org chart, which includes our two assistant pastors, Shabeli and Love, Pastor Jason, all of InReach, the missions department, the outreach department, the Bible college, all that side. The Bible college is directly under, it's what's called the church corporation. It's a separate corporation, but it's completely run by the church. So that's all on the pastoral side of the org chart. Which the executives are over all of it. Our executive meetings, we do everything from whether or not there's going to be the motorcycle club is going to use the discipleship hall, to are we going to do hot yoga in the gym, to whatever. Lots of Christian yoga, though. It's Christian yoga. It's not weird, it's Christian. No. Yes.
The mission teach, propagate, and model, right? So what do we mean by modeling there? Is it like
that we would be examples to the flock? Yeah, I mean not modeling like modeling, but the yeah. Modeling as in word and deed. The teaching is the word, and the living a Christian lifestyle is the deed. Yeah, role modeling. Yeah, I think that it actually says. I think that the actual bulletin, if you'd read it, the actual mission statement says that we live a Christian lifestyle, or live a Christian example, or something like that. The word model, I try to use just 3 words, and I could say teaching, propagating, and charactering. That's not so good. So modeling kind of works, but Sean is astute in bringing it to the forefront that the word has more than one definition. Or actually, the same definition applied to 2 different arenas of life, yeah. So, so that's interesting, isn't it? I'm very. Oh, last thing is the appeals board up here. I left them out. This was our brainchild. Problem is that we believe that the pastor teacher is the highest ranking officer in the local assembly. So, if the pastor cannot, Pastor Stephen said to his board of elders, "You didn't hire me, you can't fire me." Yeah, well, it's a nice statement, but it was absolutely false. Pastor Stevens wrote bylaws. His elders fired him. He had to be hired with a unanimous vote of his elders, but he could be fired with the majority vote of his elders. Okay, so Pastor Stevens himself, first of all, he did not have bylaws that reflected the pastor-teacher-led church. We were Presbyterian. We were an elder-led church, and our elders canned him. Straight up just canned him in a meeting where he was not present, nor was he consulted. And when he got canned, he was as powerful as a person sitting in the back row. Yeah, that happened because of our bylaws. So we said, that's a little bit, we really don't want our bylaws to be like that. So if our elders can remove any elder unanimously except one, the pastor. Our elders can't remove the pastor. We created our appeals board, which they all unanimously had to vote for every one of them, because the appeals board has power in only two situations. One, when they're going to remove the pastor. It has to be the majority vote of both boards to remove our pastor. The pastor, our elders, cannot by themselves remove our pastor. Okay, and it also says that the appeals board cannot by themselves remove her. They have no power at all until the elders vote by majority vote to remove the pastor. Then the appeals board becomes powerful. They fire up, and they are called in. Guys, you got to check this out. You have to decide. It will be your votes that decide whether or not our pastor is going to be removed or not. The reason we did this is so that we would try to avoid controversy inside the church and have outside people come in and do it. If we had done that during our perfect storm, it would have gone a little bit differently. Okay, it didn't go that way, though. I mean, our perfect storm was God's storm. We praised God for every minute of it. It was amazing. Those of us who got to go through it, it was one amazing ride. It was Barnum and Bailey's center ring circus. And we didn't know what was going to happen next. It was so cool. But anyway, so appeals board, just to finish, I'm going a little bit over, but A, if the pastor is going to be removed. B, if the elders want to remove one of themselves, like one of the elders, like happened with Pastor Paul Stevens. He was removed overnight by the elders. Nobody understood why, etc. Two things. If an elder is going to be removed, they have to have 15 days' notice before the hearing, and they need to bring evidence, and the evidence will be heard, and it would be done in an orderly fashion. Not, hey, this guy messed up, let's get together. Oh my gosh, can you believe it? Everybody agree? Yes. Hey, next day, hey, you're out, by the way. Oh, we didn't invite you to the meeting? Sorry about that, you're still out. Okay, that can't happen anymore. God was in it all. We were just growing up, Sometimes growing up is, you got to learn some lessons. So, if, though, the majority vote of the elders can remove another elder, if Pastor Shibley, whatever, went haywire, it's impossible. It's impossible for him. He's already gone haywire. No. It's impossible for Pastor Shibley. He's amazing. But if, hypothetically, he was off, they brought 15 days. Hey, did this happen? Yes, it did. They vote. There's only a majority. It's not unanimous. If it's unanimous, he's off. If it's not unanimous, the appeals board comes into life again, and now it's only with the majority vote of both boards that an elder can be removed. The reason we did that is because if it's not unanimous, it means some of the elders don't agree. Then you start campaigning, you start having sides, and the church gets to have all the troubles. So instead we said, church, relax. These guys have been voted unanimously by all of these guys, all of them knowing they could represent them at any given time, any one of them. That's why it had to be unanimous vote to have the appeals board, because the appeals board could represent any of those elders at any time, depending on what would happen. Yeah, Dakota. By definition, by their character, they have to be ordained. In the appeals board, they have to be ordained and be pastor teachers of their own congregations for at least 10 years. So they can't be assistant pastors or something. They are guys who have run churches. In the elder board, they have to be ordained pastors of Greater Grace. And the appeals board, they don't have to be Greater Grace pastors. They don't have to be Greater Grace pastors. But in the elder board, they have to be Greater Grace pastors, and they have to be ordained and be at least 35 years of age. That's the stipulation. Yeah, Andy.
Living in Baltimore, right?
No, that's not a stipulation. These in particular don't. Pastor Weiskopf, Pastor Morrison, and Pastor David Moore. Yeah.
The question is you said they have to have their own church, which
Applies they're not in Baltimore, yeah.
Local church.
Yeah. But it's not specifically stated, but by implication, to meet the requirements. Yeah. Did you have a question? Okay. That's cool, isn't it? That's cool stuff. Yeah.
What does that congregation find out about the politics going on?
The bylaws don't say anything. We leave it to the discretion of the leadership. We don't mandate that the leadership. Some things are confidential, some things aren't. Some things, it's not easy. When you have a leader who's done something bad, it's a judgment call of who knows about it, and that's a very difficult judgment call. So, okay, hey, so we'll see you next Thursday. Homework, I'll have the questions up. They will be up tomorrow or the next day, and before Thursday, yeah. There's the So, and the quiz is very straightforward. So. Study for that. Okay, so Lord bless you. God bless you. Well, I'll see you guys around.